Welcome everyone to the virtual LTC series. Today's lineup for Game 3 is Programming and Communications. My name is Tracy Packingham and I am part of the Chapter Relations team here at HFMA. To kick off the conference, we would like to thank our 2020 LTC sponsors, Parallon, Patient, Russell Investments, and Cenex. We are so glad to have so many of you dedicated volunteers here today to join us. Our goal for this virtual LTC conference is to share resources available as you embark on your leadership year in 2020-2021. Today, we will continue our series on education, programming, and communication. Chapter advancement team members Pete Sable and Marci Molman will lead things off by sharing their expertise on education plans and marketing a program. We'll be using interactive tools such as Menti, and to get crowd participation, we'll be using Zoom polling as well. Next up in our next session are fabulous sponsor presentations where business partners will share their topics and speaker offerings with chapters to include live Q&A. At 12:45, you should come on back on and join the Oregon chapter peers, Michelle Cooper and Jeff Johnson, as they share their knowledge and best practices on live streaming. Then we will wrap up the day with more of your peers on a virtual events panel discussion. Your participation is requested. There will be live Q&A during all the sessions today, so the questions that you have, please populate them in the Q&A pod. We'll also utilize the chat pod to share information and tips during the sessions. Please contribute to these chat discussions. Couple of tips: if you're viewing a webinar with a screen is shared and the presenter's video is running simultaneously, you have the ability to change the size of the shared screen and the presenter's video. In the space between the shared screen and the video, hover over the border of the shared screen. Your cursor will change to a double-sided arrow, allowing to enlarge or reduce the size of the shared screen. This will then also change the size of the presenter's screen. Let's play ball. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the presenters for this session: Pete Sable, 2020-2021 Chapter Advancement Team Chair, and Marci Molman, Chapter Advancement Team Member. Pete, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Tracy, and good morning. And feel free to use my image as your desktop or your screensaver. This is Pete Sable and Marci Molman from the Chapter Advancement Team coming to you live from the Ballpark Press Box. We had such great success with Game 2 of the virtual LTC, and Marci, honestly, I don't think anybody else was willing to do it. They asked us to come back for Game 3 today.
Yeah, I guess you must have done something right. Maybe it was all of your dad jokes you shared last week. I suppose you don't have any more to share with us today, do you?
Well, gee, I'm sure I can get up to bat with one of them. So, hey, Marci, why does a pitcher raise one leg when he throws the ball?
I don't know, Pete. Why do they?
Well, if he raised both, he'd fall down, wouldn't he, silly?
Wow. I hope you guys are ready for more dad jokes and a whole lot more learning today.
Last week we learned about social media best practices. Thank you, Jason. And we definitely want to keep the momentum going. We want to see you posting on social media today. Today's challenge is to share a picture of yourself with something that represents your state with the hashtag 2020LTC. Hashtag Go Golden Knights. Waiting for hockey to come back. We'll be selecting one winner, so get busy posting. Each post with the hashtag 2020LTC gets you one entry into our prize drawing. And I'm pretty sure the winner is going to be the new chair of the cat team. So, and you must be present.
What a prize. And just like last week, we're looking for audience participation. We'll be using Mentimeter and Zoom polling again today to ask you a few questions throughout the morning. Stay tuned for more information on how to log in to participate in the Mentimeter portion.
And now it's time to walk through today's batting order. Leading off will be me and Marci with lots of participation from the crowd. We'll be talking through the educational plan and a marketing program.
And stepping up to bat next at 11:30 is none other than your sponsors sharing information on speaker resources. They'll be live taking any questions you may have as well.
And then next, we'll take a 30-minute break. Yay! So everyone has a chance to refresh their beer. Grab some peanuts and Cracker Jacks before settling back into their seats at 12:45. And yes, it is 8 a.m. in Las Vegas. Get ready to start the wave as your peers from Oregon step up to the plate to share their live streaming best practice.
And then after that 7th inning stretch, 2 to 2:30, you can look forward to a live panel discussion with some of your hometown favorites. We have quite the panel lineup, including Oregon, Georgia, Texas Gulf Coast, Oklahoma, and Region 2. Get ready to hear from them as they share tips and tricks on virtual events.
That's quite the day, Marci.
It sure is. Now let's get started with some audience participation. To participate, grab your phone, tablet, or use your computer to log into menti.com and type in the code you see at the top of the screen right now. That's 362995. Then just follow along on your screen as we ask the questions.
And it is Menti, not Mentos. I learned that the hard way.
That's the fresh maker.
So obviously the question, how are you doing today? Ready for the weekend? We've got a chat just dropped up and took over my screen.
That's Groundhog's Day. That's how I feel.
And then where do I even start? That's like Marci when we're prepping for these.
Right. Or every time you tell a dad joke. Internally, that's what I'm doing. Looks like most people are ready for the weekend. Me too.
Marci, we've got 117 participants. That is good. A lot of peeps out there. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. I'm sure they all wanted to listen to your dad jokes again.
I know, and I'll tell you, Groundhog Day, one of my favorite movies. Second, or actually just before that, is What About Bob? Underrated classic.
That is a classic.
Right? I like taking baby steps.
I work in a company with a lot of younger people, and I say Bueller a lot from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. They don't understand it. So I think I must need to come up with a new joke.
Shelly, also getting some shout outs on the pancake joke. I'm glad that has been making the rounds. Pop Euchre. That's good stuff. All right. So which chapter are you from? This is the fun one where I think it pops up all over the place. It's kind of like how my mind works, Marci. No filter.
Yeah. Ooh, we got Montana right off the bat. That's my home.
Nice.
Good job, Montana. Minnesota, Oregon.
I thought Western New York was why at first. I'm like, why?
Why?
Because we love you.
Yeah.
Because we want to know where you're coming from. Welcome, Western New York. And all the other fun things that are populating. Wow, we got lots of chapters today. Awesome.
Nice. The best chapter ever. That's bad. So what is your chapter volunteer role?
What would you classify yourself as, Pete? I'm just curious what's in your head.
I would say jack of all trades.
Yeah, how about you, Marci?
Well, currently I'm actually the past president of Montana, so that's where I would be.
Oh, nice.
3 times removed.
Hey, you know, it takes some of us longer. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. They just wanted to keep me around longer.
Yes.
For my sparkling personality.
That's what we call it. I thought it was a work release program, but whatever.
Thanks, Pete.
I like Peacemaker. That's a good one.
Peacemaker, there you go. Chairman of the board. I like it.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know, we did get the CVEN Q&A session scheduled for June 16th. So if anybody's out there that needed some extra time with Cvent, know that we have scheduled them for next Tuesday.
And Tracy, was it true what I heard that Cvent's going to get an upgrade to Dvent?
I don't know. I have not heard that, Pete, but I'm sure you're going to tell me what that means.
Oh, man.
It's going to be a long morning. Did you attend last Friday's virtual LTC? Oh, so we got some first timers here.
Got some first timers to listen to you, Pete. So
Oh, nice. I'm
let's
sorry.
not try to scare them away, okay?
And a big shout out to my Uncle Joe for letting me do this. I mean, Mr. Pfeiffer.
My Uncle Joe. Oh, dear goodness.
Oh, no.
Did I say that I'm streaming live from the HFMA chalet in Switzerland? It's beautiful here.
Chalet.
What are you hoping to get out of today's session? Dad jokes.
Dad jokes.
Oh, you're in the right place.
Yes.
That was me, by the way.
World peace. Well,
Peace.
I don't know if we're going to accomplish that today.
Go Marci. I think we got a little fan club for you.
Yeah, I like it. Streaming best practices. Peanuts. Someone's looking for peanuts out of this today.
Like Charlie Brown
Beer.
peanuts?
Maybe. Someone's got beer.
Tracy keeps pulling the football every time I run to go kick it, so I fall for it every time.
Oh, man. Every time. Cotton candy. A drink coupon. Can we send people a virtual drink coupon? Is that like a real thing? I think that would be good.
How about I went to LTC shirt and all I got was this shirt, right? One of those. Popcorn, good ideas, help. World peace.
Help.
How to promote a webinar. So what's the appropriate, because I started calling things webinars and they're like, hey grandpa, they're virtual conferences. Is there a new nomenclature for, because I know there's Zoom, there's WebEx,
Right.
There's Skype, there's what's the today's nomenclature of what you would call that?
So a webinar is when there's no speaker on video. A
Okay.
virtual conference is when it's live with a video component or a camera component on. The digital side of things is where it makes it virtual. And a webinar, if it's just a PowerPoint, kind of thing that you can record and watch later because you really just listen, that's what that's considered.
Yeah, I have to be honest, Tracy, I totally zoomed out and didn't catch any of that.
Nice, Pete. Nice reference to
kid.
Zoom. Just gonna
I
say.
kid, I
Yeah.
knew you'd have the answer to that.
I
It
know.
was, trying to nudge you to help share
Yeah.
some of your wealth of knowledge.
It's all good.
We call them webinars versus webcast. Webcast. They say
Oh,
that
that's
is
nice. Yeah, I
those
like that.
when people are talking live. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I said telephone to my kids and they were like I said gramophone or something. They're like, what?
What's that?
That's like
We
on
don't
my
just
little.
talk on the telephone these days.
Well, I was on a
do
conference
Zoom.
yesterday, and one of the things they were talking about, it was a referral management system that we're implementing in one of our markets. And they were talking about, here's where you'd put in the fax number. And my daughter had said, what's a fax? I was like, ouch.
So that's so funny though, because we put facsimile on a document, and one of my coworkers that I told you are young earlier asked what that was. So it's going away. There will no longer be those things.
Right. I should probably move off my green bar paper.
You still have one of those like old typewriters. if you had served as a program chair before, tell us what works best in developing content. NA?
I'd have to say alcohol.
Nothing, yeah.
Now, Pete, now come on. So we will be hearing from the sponsors that they will be offering a lot of wealth of topics. And, you know, I know that they, several of them have the ability to have some providers speak with them. And the virtual component definitely is coming into play this year. So on a serious note, you know, to bring it back, Pete, because some people really do need to learn today. So we have that, but another thing that you can refer to is your membership satisfaction surveys. A lot of times people will put in topics and things that they're looking for solutions, et cetera, in those type of things.
Absolutely. Help from past chairs is, I think, a good one too.
Yeah. So somebody asked why I wasn't on the screen, and my comment back to them was because Pete needs to have more of the screen time than myself. So, and we, you know, we're in the background just for support purposes. So I'm the beer man today, carrying around the beer cooler, you know, saying beer here.
Well, Tracy, we call you the beer person, first of all, and secondly, screen time is in my contract. So
sure is. I like the provider input, networking.
Yep. And we're going to be going over this in our presentation sort of coming up. You know, because you really want to make sure that you're hitting it on your content. But there's a lot of other things that go into setting up a successful event as well. I was 3-4-time program chair, and I also sit on some of our sort of tentpole committees. One of them was the Nevada Healthcare Forum. I think I had shared in the past. And when I was president a bagillion years ago, I think we're heading into our 14th or 15th year of doing this. I got together with the president in Nevada of ACHE, MGMA, and HIMSS, and we set up a cross-association meeting now that we've been doing for, as I said, about 15 years, and it's been fantastic. And what we found in Nevada was there were a lot of folks that were coming here to do revenue cycle, annual conference, and whatnot. We wanted to do an event that was specific to just Nevadans. So we bring in state senators, and, you know, we had Harry Reid and some other folks we invited in the past, and it's been really, really successful. We get a lot of the C-suite people to come. Very high level. The challenge that we're going into now is we've been planning this, or started our planning since February, it comes up in October, is how we sort of look at, you know, maybe having a virtual to the extent that this, you know, the pandemic hits up again in the fall, or whether we're going to do sort of a hybrid approach or still in person. So we're doing surveys with past folks to try to, you know, gain a sense of whether they would feel comfortable getting together collectively, obviously with appropriate social distancing in place.
Yeah, we just sent out a survey for Montana to kind of figure out those exact things.
Great. So great segue. Let's get into our education plan and marketing your program. Next slide. This is Pete Sable, and that's my high school picture, my yearbook picture we have up there, and the great Marci Bowman. Marci, looks like you got your MBA done since I think I last saw this slide, so nice to see that. So we will be helping to facilitate these discussions. So learning objectives, these are important, guys. You know, all seriousness aside, at the end of the session, you want to be able to create an outline for your program, plan for the year. And for those of you that have been here before, you know, this is really kind of key. And we'll spend some time going over that for new folks. You know, the outline, I think, is sort of important. And you should also be able to describe useful resources on the HFMA website and how to access them. There are so much information out there. I'm a very big fan of not reinventing the wheel. So in my experience, again, of chairing programs for many, many years for HFMA and for other associations and boards, I like to, you know, sort of lean against what sort of works and try to modify it for something that will work in the future.
Yeah, and they do actually have an education program planning template. It was posted to the Leadership Connection community group. So hopefully you are all able to download it. If not, make sure you go out there and get that template. Following the steps will really help you lead a successful program. I think we need to spend some time brainstorming specific ideas for each section of the template. So we want you to watch for some Zoom polls that are going to be coming up. Yeah, so the first step on the checklist is very critical to understand who your target audience is. This drives the type of content you deliver, learning objectives, topics, and speakers. If you miss here, you are really missing the whole piece of setting up your program.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to be able to describe the intended audience in specific job-related terms, which they will understand and recognize. If you're selling something, you need to know who your buyers are. Same thing, same concept. Your chapter demographic profiles can help with this. Things to take into consideration for your attendees. What are their daily job responsibilities? You don't want to be offering education for CFOs when you've got, your entry-level analysts coming to your conference. What do they need to make a difference in the performance of their jobs? If you answer this, you can start to develop your program. Talk to them, listen for their perceived needs and felt needs. Again, what is their experience levels? Know the hot topics for those specific areas. And so now I think we're going to bring up our Zoom poll.
Yeah, and while they're coming up with that, I mean, you really hit on it, Marci. I would find things like trying to set up a CFO panel or have CFO sort of involved during month-end close, usually very difficult. Always try to also look at things around like sort of holidays and such, be very mindful of big sporting events. We were doing a big charity event, and it was the playoffs with the Golden Knights a few years ago. We actually had to put up the game because there were so many people. Everybody was just sitting on their phones. So some stuff, it's kind of hard to plan for. So the first question is, who is the audience you target most for events? And the selections are providers, business partners, enterprise members, anyone or other. And darn it, Marci, host and panelists cannot participate. How dare they?
We can't vote. We already know the answer.
Yeah, guys, and these checklists I think are very important, and you want to make sure that you're using these. I would use these again. I mean, just think about it. You just want to make sure that you're hitting every one of the categories, right? That you want to make sure that you're hitting to make sure that there's not something sort of glaring on it. You can put so many hours and time and effort and put up the best event, but if you miss on a date, or if you miscommunicate, or if information's not getting to sort of the target audience. So you can put on an event and get a target audience there, but you also want to remember about a retention as well. So you don't want to sort of do an event, have people come and you say, hey, we're going to talk about cost reporting, and a whole bunch of people come there and it's not talked about or not at that right sort of calibrated level. So that's where I think it's important to understand, who you're going out and marketing. Is that information getting over to them? And then is the speaker and content, time, date, all of those different things to go together to making it sort of an important meeting sort of click with that audience, because you want them to be able to sort of create, in my mind, unless it's just intended to be sort of a one-off, something that could potentially be a scalable event that you could use multiple times.
Yeah, and we do that in Montana. We have our main conference that's available for everyone, that we really try to diversify our content. But we also have a roadshow that we try to make more specific to those entry-level associates that may not be able to travel to the bigger conferences. Maybe they don't have the budget. They may or may not even be HFMA members. So we're trying to also bridge that gap. And then we travel to the hospitals and put on the presentations for them. So I think it's just really important that you, again, understand your audience, make sure you're targeting those specific people and topics so that your outcomes are where you want them to be.
I would agree. And do we have the next question? I don't know if I'm not seeing it.
Got another question. Yeah. There we go. How do you measure your program success? We've got survey results, attendance, networking at event, sponsorship dollars, or other. I think survey results are important, but part of the battle there, Pete, and I don't know how you guys are doing, is just getting people to fill out the surveys. So,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, we finally made the push to go away from paper surveys to do the online surveys. And it seems like, we were able to be actually a little more successful with the online surveys because they were able to get that email at the end of the day and be able to give real-time feedback. But it's important to get the surveys back first.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And if you think of it from sort of an NPS perspective, where you're trying to get your sort of detractors and stuff, when we would do our big Western symposium back in the day, the manual and whoever was sort of the lead chapter was responsible for aggregating all of the responses that would come back. And we had multiple breakouts and a very, very large multi-day event. And you'd get things like room is too cold, room is too hot, speaker's too loud, can't hear the speaker. I mean, it was just, you're going to get the people. And I think now with either SurveyMonkey or sort of the different components of electronic, people can be sort of a little bit mindful of thinking, hey, I just sat through, an entire day full of meetings, and, they're not necessarily going to take notes and always go back. So I think the more real time you can get those survey event results, the more actionable they are. But be sort of mindful that, you can get one or two people that, depending upon your polling sample and results, that could not necessarily be representative response of the quality or challenges. It might just be an issue for that one person. But I think knowing what your intended goal is, right? And I know that in the chat people had said all the above. I would tend to agree. But are you looking to sort of make money off of this? Are you looking at be a little bit more geared towards networking? Sometimes it's hard to make every single person happy and check off every single box. But I think that goes back to sort of, your targeted audience and needs. There's an old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Have a plan for what you want to do, and then take that information back to be able to tailor that. And to the extent that the survey results allow you, do an outreach. Maybe there's an opportunity to bring one of those individuals into your committee or part of your planning process to help make these events, or volunteer at a desk, or help with registration or setups and stuff. That's how I got involved in a lot of this stuff. All right, Brivana, did I say that right?
Yeah, Brivana.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So do your chapter events provide what your members want, right? You really need to hit on it. So research has showed that members want to attend events. It'll be very interesting, I think, moving forward, whether, sort of the thoughts on how we're doing events, if they're not going to be as in-person, which are a lot of the ones that I've helped set up over the years. And then maybe trying to gear those to, maybe smaller hours. It's kind of hard to sit on video conferences for 8 hours. It's easier to sort of go to an event where you can sort of walk out and kind of do stuff. But research shows that members want to attend events, and one study found that 43% of Gen Y and millennials are attending more association events than ever, and that's great. And we've done for HFMA in the past, and it's been very, very interesting. It was many years ago, but we had a speaker called the Generationalist, and they would come in and say, hey, at this particular point in time, and I think it was maybe 10 years or so ago, we've got 5 or 6 different generations in the workforce right now. Well, think about in the course of the last 10 years how technology has sort of increased, and the way that we are sort of reworking ourselves as a society certainly is an opportunity for us to pivot. And then members are interested in continual learning. I mean, I personally want to get something out of the events. I'm very mindful at this sort of stage in my career in my life that I want the things that I'm doing because I want to do them and they're meaningful to me. So events need to provide high quality education. As we had said earlier, we can put on an event, it can sound really good, but if you're not targeting the right folks, and you don't have the right message and the right content and the right speaker or the right location, the right date, you didn't communicate right, there's a lot of things that can kind of go wrong. And, first and foremost, I think you need to make sure that you are delivering what you're communicating you're going to do. And then other two pieces are needed to get the members to attend. So you can have an amazing speaker. But if you're communicating it at the last minute, or if it's in a location that people can't get to, and even now, right? We talked about before the call about, what different companies are doing. Are they easing up on whether it's okay for people to sort of travel? And as Tracy had said to Marci and I, how do you guys feel? Do you personally feel okay sort of with traveling? So I said I would absolutely go to Maui. I'll take the 2-week self-quarantined. I'm taking a hit for the team, Tracy. I'm a giver. And then do chapter events provide what your members want, right? So that goes back to, I think, the survey. And you don't have to rely just on the survey. You can actually kind of talk to people, right? So if you've got an event that you think is going to be very important, you put it on, people come to it, and outreach to them and say, hey, person that I respect, did this kind of provide what you think that you were looking for? So 2 ingredients needed to drive member attendance, as you can read on the screen: interactions, connections, and community. Different people, in my experience, join sort of associations for different things. I think first and foremost for me, it is the interaction. That's the hardest part of making a lot of this stuff virtual. Which is why I put this in my contract. And then the connections and community, right? Now's the time when we really should be reaching out to. I try to hit 4 or 5 people a day where I will text them or call them and just let them know I'm thinking about them. How are you doing? How is your family? HFMA has been a very big part of community for me for many years. And then member attendance content, as I said, is very, very important. Experience to remember, right? You want these things, say a stupid dad joke or something. You want people to kind of like it. Personally, and this is not a dig against sort of CFOs, I can find and sit through a bunch of these different meetings and it's very dry to me. So I love when you have somebody that's sort of a little engaging. I think you can tell when somebody's passionate about what they're doing. And to the extent that, we do our former LTCs, right? Putting bicycles together, bowling. I mean, we've done some really cool stuff sort of over the years. To me, those are the things that I walk away from as sort of what I would consider an experience. And then, one study showed that 78% of millennials would rather spend time and money on experiences, concerts, travel, dining out, products. I can personally attest to that because I have a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old, and they absolutely love to spend their time and my money on experiences.
Yeah, and I think that segues great into the next slide, which, really, you want to pair a networking event with your educational event. I think really you want to bring in that community sense. You can do community, focus on giving back. You want to make it a memorable experience. In Montana, we do our give back event as our networking event in the November-December timeframe. And essentially, because we're such a geographically distant state, we try to put little locations in each area. So like some of the major cities, we set up working at the food bank or working at your local soup kitchen. And then anybody can join that's in that area. So we try to set up multiple events throughout the state rather than one, big event. And so we've been doing that for the last couple of years, and it's been really successful. I think that again, just gives you that opportunity to network outside of the main event, but also to feel like you are providing benefit for your community and that HFMA is providing benefit for your community. Next slide. So after you have identified your target audience and their needs, you need to address the intended audience perceived and felt needs regarding improving job performance. Learning outcomes do 2 things. They provide focus for the time together and the promised benefit for attending. Clear outcomes are the glue joining learners, presenters, and presentation activities. Learning outcomes drive learning objectives. Like good outcomes, good learning objectives they're concrete and specific, understandable, attainable, of course. You want them to be compelling. You want to have, some measure, provide for measurability. And when you think about developing objectives, you want to be able to tell your participants participants what you'll be able to do. You know, answer the question, do what? Tell what degree your participants will be able to do what, to, by what degree, or when. And you want to tell what degree your participants will be able to do what, to when, using what. What resources are you going to use to meet your objective?
That sounded like a Doctor Who, not Doctor Who, Dr. Seuss.
Who, what,
Look at me nerding out. I wish I could get my TARDIS to go back in time and reframe that joke. No.
Yep. Who, what, where, when, why? By when?
You're so right. And I like the one that resonated with me that you had just said is attainable on the program, right? So, you know, at the end of this event, you'll be able to take your, you know, CPA exam. I mean, some of these need to, you know, again, be sort of level set. I like when they'll do sort of, you know, advanced, intermediary, sort of beginner, you know, kind of set the stage. But yeah, being concrete and specific, I think, is really important too. So that is some very, very sage advice that you have given, Marci. Thank you. Next slide.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all heard about SMART goals, you know, so you can always think about that when you're creating your objectives, is to make the goals SMART so that, you know, you can be able to look back and ensure that the goal makes sense to others and is actually able to be attainable and measurable, all those things.
I'm going to write that down. SMART goals, like SMART.
SMART.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've never heard of SMART goals?
How can you argue with a SMART goal?
Yeah, it takes
awesome.
them a little
Wow,
longer.
Pete.
So we have some commentary going on, and I just wanted to bring this out because I think it is important that some areas are not going to be able to open up for live meetings. So we really have to talk about all of the things COVID in mind, and I can help with this a little bit because we've been looking at social distancing information regarding how do you set up a meeting room, you know, and how do you keep people safe and 6 feet apart in the dynamic that we're kind of looking at, maybe blending face-to-face and virtual sessions. So we'll cover a little bit of that this afternoon on the virtual panel, but I didn't want it to go unheard because I think talking about face-to-face meetings is a little different than the virtual world. So if you guys want to kind of pivot a little bit on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's great. And as we're talking about the program presenters and sort of format, Tracy, I think that's a great sort of segue. So one of the things, as I said on a bunch of different committees for different educational events, both in multiple sort of arenas of healthcare, not just for HFMA. Where I think we have the opportunity is we're maybe shifting over to more virtual and folks getting a little bit more of a, hey, I'm kind of okay with this. You know, this kind of works for me. We're even looking to do, and we took the page from Tracy and HFMA's sort of playbook, maybe do some pre-recorded parts of this. So it's a lot easier to get a speaker to share something that they have already done and then maybe jump on to do sort of a Q&A after that.
Right.
You know, they may not feel comfortable physically coming to Las Vegas, but, you know, they'd be willing. And then, you know, obviously the cost component of that certainly goes down quite a bit as well. So now more than ever, I think it is incredibly important to make sure that you are very, very clear about what the role of the presenter is. I think that that's absolutely key. Also want to make sure that, you know, are you okay with them, you know, hawking books or websites, or, you know, being careful you're not turning this into, you know, kind of a big sales meeting, because sometimes that can turn folks off.
Well, that's one of the good things about video recording is you kind of, you know, eliminate that sales, you know, opportunity as well. Another thing is we're learning that we can hit maybe even more attendees virtually that wouldn't be allowed to travel. And we understand the travel restrictions that are coming into play and expense reductions with the providers. And as we saw earlier during the polling, providers, you know, are our main, you know, contact for when we're planning meetings. With that being said, we do need to, you know, take that into consideration when planning events for, you know, the future, especially in the next, you know, 6 to 12 months. If we can hit more people and live stream and, you know, offer it in a blended format, you know, just kind of keep that in the back of your hat when you're looking at planning your year for 2020, 2021. Another thing that goes along with that is Blending events is, that live streaming. We're going to be hearing from, like I mentioned earlier, Jeff and Michelle at the 12:45 session, and they have a lot of information that is going to be shared. That is essential to know, and we've been asked that question for quite some time, even before we entered into the new environment. So we'll be looking for some great information during that session as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. That's all. And as I had said in the Nevada Healthcare Forum, we're having those discussions right now. Right? How do we? This is one of our what we call our tentpole events, and how do we hybrid this? And how do we get state senators to come? And are they pre-recording sort of things? And the cost component is sort of interesting. And then there's also, I think we touched base a little bit on this in our first session. How do you sort of restructure a sponsorship, right? Do you have them do sort of a video? Is there a different way to sort of, because that's where a majority of sort of our revenue, we try to sort of break even on the registration component from the participants, but, kind of make the dollars on sponsorship. But when you're looking at your presenters, I think it sounds kind of obvious, but going back to sort of the outcomes that you want to deliver in the program, are the people that you're choosing, are they capable of sort of achieving the objectives of the program? I can speak. I think is important. The ability to achieve the objectives is the primary selection criteria. So verified content expertise, right? So if you have, hey, I want Pete to come and talk about yada, 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 do a little bit of research, right? Make sure if they presented sort of before, see if there's a way you can outreach to either another chapter, or I've done that a bunch of times before. Hey, so-and-so came here, because a lot of folks in healthcare, especially sort of engaging speakers, will share, go and look them up. Maybe they have, some of their presentations online. See if you think that would be a good fit for your group. And then, the next one, request speaking references and call them, right? Even though, they sort of put down, call my mom, my best friend. But do a little bit of research, especially, if this is, kind of one of your big events. Don't just kind of go on what the speaker is sort of saying. We've even had some folks at some of our large HFMA events where I scratched my head and said, I can't believe they spent as much money as I think they spent on this guy. Really stunk. So they're not all sort of winners. Discuss target audience needs and outcomes with the speaker. So make sure that they are sort of understanding what you're looking to sort of get out of it. As I talked about, talk about sort of the program objectives, right? Sometimes folks will come in as you're sort of looking for presenters, and they already sort of have a, sort of a canned presentation or thoughts in mind. Some of the best presenters that I've sort of met with, they'll pivot and they'll come in and they'll read the audience. They'll come into Vegas, they'll drive around, get a little sense of what they are, and say, even, what's HFMA? Who's my audience? Are they local? Is it mixed? Is it C-level? Are we talking to line staff? So, vet that out a little bit, because I think the more you can sort of engage the programmers, I think the better you can do. So how long was your symposium event? So I've been part of sort of the Western Region Symposium, which is now the Region 10, Region 11, and it's a multi-day event. And we have done a lot of different things over the years where we'll have a number of sort of keynote speakers, a whole series of sort of breakouts, but it's a multi-day event. And then emphasize interactivity and practical jokes. Oh, no, practical takeaways. Sorry, I misread that. Tools, tips, techniques, strategies, and any things you'd sort of think of. So I think at this point, we're going to go into a Zoom poll, if my notes are accurate. So how do you effectively communicate with speakers? We've got email, conference call, virtual meeting, paid administrator for chapter and region, speaker resource like CVent or other. And once again, Marci, they're not letting us participate.
Not letting us participate.
They don't want our feedback. How dare they?
I think it's important to, when you're thinking about virtual and the coming year is, you can have your plan A if your state's going back or your region is going back to, open up, you can have your plan A. But I think it goes back to maybe that presentation from Grace, and there's plan G, right? Like you got to have all the way down the line about what's going to happen, and we're starting to do that even for the Western Region Symposium, which is scheduled for January. We're really starting to think about well, what if we did have to do this? Like, what does it look like? Does it even make sense, logically for providers? Because that's, like the poll indicated, that's who you're really targeting to. Does it make sense to do a multi-day event that way? Or do you need to pivot and look at it completely differently?
Yeah, that's so smart. And I mean, you think of like back in the day, hey, if the projector doesn't work, I've got an overhead projector with a grease pencil. I mean, we're getting way out there, especially when you have people. What do you do if the internet goes down? What do you do if a speaker can't come in? I mean, is there an ability to switch over to sort of telephonic? I think that there's a lot of lessons learned and having those contingency plans in place. And being humble about it. We're treading a lot of new ground and just working through, sort of the best way to sort of do this. And it's going to be a little difficult for people that don't necessarily embrace change. We don't really have a choice, right? So we're going into it. Next slide. I'm not sure if we have another. There we go. Okay. Marketing a program and, communicating with the members, right? So as the question we just sort of heard, email is a common way to communicate, but I don't know about you guys. I get about 150 emails a day, and that's just sort of in my work stuff. So people complain about sort of email overload, as it says sort of on the slide. So what can we do to ensure members sort of read our emails? I did a facilitation with the fantastic Oklahoma chapter, and they had a series of enterprise memberships in there. And as I understand it, when they were sending, sort of communication out, it was getting sort of blocked getting in when they were sending sort of manual information, and it was just going into the mailroom, because unlike sort of a member where they would sort of check off, in sort of a non-membership thing, hey, I want mail to sort of go here. Everything was going to the mailroom, and invitations to events and stuff were just sitting in there. So that was really great feedback they received, because sometimes you can scratch your head and say, I put on this amazing event. How come we didn't get people to sort of show up to this? Well, people didn't even know it was occurring. So either the communication method was being blocked, or it was just sort of lost, right? I love sort of save the dates. I love if you're doing sort of a tentpole event, to the extent that you're planning that far out, try to communicate and get people to sign up as they're leaving the event that they're at, right? So, try to share it through newsletters on your sort of websites, share it, pick up the telephone and, call people, make sure that they've sort of received it. You can even sort of test it out.
I don't think you need to ditch emails altogether, obviously. They do work if you navigate them correctly, just like Pete was talking about. If you set it up, I guess on the slide here, it says the average worker spends about 3 hours looking at their email, that's kind of crazy. But I think it's important that you, start with an action verb, that you make it compelling. It's a call to action, for your subject line. I even do that in my own work. So, it makes sense that we need to do it when we're sending out emails to members too. Share interesting tidbits. We've talked a lot about how, you're going away from the traditional newsletter. Does it make more sense to do like an email blast? I think that those kind of things are things to make sure your members are ready for. Is it a survey to say, what kind of communication do you prefer? I just really think you want to make sure that members are opening the message first. You have those interesting things at the beginning, and then you can, put in there a plug for your event. Next slide.
Yeah, and I just saw, I'm trying to kind of see the chat thing.
We got a question.
And it doesn't have so much a question. It looks like it's the Neo chapter. It looks like they do sort of Monday blasts. So having a cadence that people can, hey, it's kind of cool. Every Monday I get this, as opposed to do it once. Yeah, hit or miss type stuff. I think, we're all kind of repetitive like that.
Another question that has come in, Pete, is about policies including payers. We talk a lot about providers. And it says, how can we discuss payment policies without including payers? And so maybe we need to talk a little bit about what, and maybe we can have them populate in the chat of do pairs consist of providers in, for events, including them? Because for this example was my company is a health plan owned by 15 hospitals in Metro New York. And I know that like Presbyterian in New Mexico also has their own health plan. And there's other, there's a lot, right? And so can we just have a discussion and populate in the chat for others that see that as a value, and maybe we need to change our mindset on that a little.
Yeah, I've sort of been on, I did 15 years or so on the provider side. Then I had flipped over to, people used to call it the dark side, Marci. I'd say actually it's quite light. I had a very pretty office with a big window. Exactly. So I spent a number of times sort of on the health plan side. Now that I'm over at Optum, sort of a little blending of two. So part of what I do is setting up risk-bearing entities and taking risk on various sort of products. So we've done payer panels. I've written stuff for HFM. So I was kind of the go-to person, sat on NAC for sort of payment policy and stuff. I think it's very important. I think if you go back to kind of the initial stuff, you can't just have a one-sided conversation. And, we, at least in sort of the areas that I've been involved in, definitely outreach. When we did the Western Symposium, we had, a panel that consisted of health plans. When we do our Nevada Healthcare Forum, we'll have the payer, provider, industry, physician, nurse. We'll try to make sure that we have, all of the different areas sort of addressed. So we're trying to make the message as broad as possible.
Yeah, I think Montana has been really successful in always involving our payers in our conferences. For years we've had a payer panel and then payer updates. And we've always been really successful about bringing them in. I think because we've always had that collaborative nature. I know that a lot of other areas have had challenges in that, but I think, there's definitely opportunity, and there's definitely things that you can do to bring those people in to continue that conversation.
Yeah, and I'll jump off that, Marci. I think what's sort of important, again, having been, on the provider side as long as I have, and then flipping over to, if you're inviting, it's just a little sort of tip from Pete's toolbox. You want it to be a safe space. So you don't want to have a provider go into a panel and get nothing but railed on. You suck, you don't pay claim, blah, 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 all that sort of, you want to have sort of a dialogue. Because that's going to turn sort of payers off, or it turns into a negotiation. And if you're looking to sort of understand how, sort of a health plan is working, or what their sort of strategies are, and things of sort of that nature, there's going to be a certain amount of proprietary information that they're probably not going to be able to share, or they'd want to be just sort of careful to do. We've worked very hard to make sure that, as we're going in and monitoring these, you want to be there to kind of shut that down. And that word will sort of get out too. Okay, so we are moving along because I'm getting a couple of pokes from our boss.
Us. Move along. I think this is me. So this is just really, make sure you're referencing your chapter resource center and event planning page under the chapter resources. There is a ton of information out here. And like Pete said earlier, why recreate the wheel when you already have this information available to you? Make sure you reach out to your peers. That's the intention of being, with the HFMA community. It's huge. There's so many people that have done this before and are doing it well. And I think that that's really important, that you utilize those tools that are out there for you. Next slide.
You're very welcome, Tracy. See, I'm multitasking here. I've got texts and various.
You got multiple things going on.
Yeah, I do.
So yeah, that event planning site holds templates, speaker resources, guidelines. You can find information about best practices, selecting speakers, managing C-Event, promotions, public relations, education, and CPE guidelines. It's got it all. So again, that event planning checklist is out there posted to the Leadership Connection. So make sure that you download that. Because again, we don't, the intention of all of this is not to make this like your sole focus. We all know that you have regular jobs, that you don't do, your volunteer. Everybody's a volunteer, right? You want to be able to really utilize the resources that are out there so that you don't feel like you're setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, and I know we're kind of short on time, but I want to impress that to me, this could be very daunting. I think as sort of a newer volunteer, I can say I wish I had these types of resources in my day job, meaning that HFMA, I think, is as Marci had said, very aware of the fact that this is not sort of the primary function of a lot of folks that volunteer for this. And we're setting you up to win. We're trying to continually learn and modify. And it could be daunting. Go into some of these things and don't overwhelm yourself, but know that there are toolkits and information in there, writing letters, how to get assistance on things, reaching out to chapter relations. I mean, these are all things that, Marci and I have both done that have helped us get to, the pinnacle of volunteerism that is the CAT team. Next slide.
Yes, exactly.
Is this when you or me, Marci?
I think it's you.
All right. Connect in the Leadership Connection online community and the educational program community. I know Brianna had shared a lot of that in the past. So there's exclusive program chairs and co-chairs. Education Program Community Group was launched June 3rd and can be used as a connection point for program chairs and co-chairs to collaborate and idea share with educational programming peers and the association education community. Very important, guys. Bounce ideas off of stuff. I think we're going to go into a Zoom poll. All right. Have you gone out to Leadership Connection Community Group? Yes or no? Or what?
Hopefully everybody says yes.
Good thing we're not allowed to vote on this.
I know. I just think, part of the best attributes of HFMA is the networking and being able to, talk to your peers and be able to get those ideas, not only for just obviously this program planning and everything else, but for your day-to-day job.
Yeah. Do we have one more question yet? Program chairs and co-chairs, have you had the chance to go out to the new educational programming community group? Same as before, yes, no, or what is the educational program community group? So if you guys hadn't noticed, we're putting surveys into the presentation to get feedback, and we're using chat and Q&As. We're sort of practicing what we're preaching here.
So we actually are going to be sharing polling information with everyone in attendance today, as well as populated it into the community. So these things will be shared after today's sessions.
Yeah, it's very meta.
Yeah, and do we have any questions coming in, Tracy? I know we didn't leave ourselves a lot of time, but.
Actually, we've answered most of them. A couple that I think just are relevant to kind of have a call out. One is about how do we battle new strict firewalls and actually receive notifications. And I do believe that is still a concern with CVent. And so we are working with CVent on making sure that we all of our communications are coming out of the United States from the servers that our communications come from. And so currently we're coming out of Pennsylvania, so that has improved. However, there's still the firewalls that are in place. The chapters that have a higher answer rate require a survey to be answered in order to receive that certification or that certificate of attendance or CPE certificate. And when they need to have that, somehow we can get like a Gmail address, or they find a way to populate the survey. So those are just some quick answers for that. But I do think that it is a thing that we will be discussing on June 16th with CVent to see if there's any other suggestions that they might have for us.
Sounds good. Marci, I think you and I should start our own YouTube channel, start getting some sponsors.
that was another discussion. Yeah.
All the dad jokes in the world.
Sponsorship is really a hot topic in some of the discussion that has been going on. And I will tell you that is part of our panel this afternoon. but there's multiple answers to this question. Some is, if there is a speaker that requires still an honorarium to speak even virtually, that is a sponsorship opportunity. And then you allow the sponsor to be the moderator, like Pete, the screen time that's in Pete's contract, we would share that with the sponsor. So those are a few ideas that have come in, and I know that we are at time. So I want to thank you too for all your help, and then I'll let you guys set up the next session.
Yeah, so as a reminder, you need to use the different Zoom links to access each of the next 3 sessions. The link for the 11:30 session has been populated in the chat box.
All right, and don't forget to be posting on social media using hashtag 2020LTC. We want to see you in something that represents your state. We'll be drawing a winner. I already won during the 2:30 session today. We'll see you guys back here real soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.